Welcome to Pitch It To Me Podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of Flesh and Blood design. Fab is a dirty game. You gotta play dirty to win it. That's why I haven't changed my sleeves in 3 years. Today's episode will be all about hidden information and how it affects the game. On Red Pitch, Fuzzy will quickly talk about a few different ways you can utilize hidden information in Flesh and Blood. In Yellow Pitch, Joel will give some examples of hidden information in other trading card games. On Blue Pitch, Clark will dream about new hidden info mechanics in the future. You can find us across all socials such as TikTok and Instagram at Pitch It To Me Podcast. I'm Joel.
I'm Fuzzy.
And I'm Clark.
Someone asked me what I've been up to.
Fuzzy, what have you been up to? Question mark.
I just turned 27.
Let's go!
Fun fact, all other Pitch It To Me podcast hosts are older than me. I was the last to turn 27.
So wait, you're the youngest sibling.
Yeah, you guys are like my brothers.
You're so young, younger sibling code.
So that means that we... No, he isn't. Fuzzy is like...
I'm daddy.
Hey, not the slightest.
I'm your brother, daddy.
That is not at all. Okay, so we finally got our first look at a lot of the Part the Mistveil cards. LSS released both deck lists and videos of the Blitz decks for the 3 upcoming heroes in Part the Mistveil.
I didn't know they did videos as well.
Yeah, they did gameplay videos, which were really awesome, even though they kind of felt a little staged.
Sure.
It was a little odd, but like we saw each hero take a game and lose a game.
Interesting. That does sound staged.
It sounds a little staged, especially because in one of the games, it was the Zin deck. The Zin deck in one of the games lost, I think, to New because they were at
Do you mean no?
No. Because they were at 1 life and just didn't activate the chest equipment to block the final attack to live an additional turn.
Interesting.
They were just kind of like, oh, I have these 2 non-block cards in my hand. Guess I lose. And I'm like,
well,
you can...
Did they go to 1 that same turn?
Yeah.
It flips at the start of your turn.
Oh, at the start of your turn.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Clark's just an asshole.
That was a nice surprise, though, to have just a huge like chunk of the cards where we get a really good look at how each of the characters are going to be piloting. And Fabry, of course, as clutch as they are, uploaded all those cards so we can start testing with them immediately. So it's been a really interesting spoiler season.
You mean Talishar?
Well, Talishar and Fabry.
Yeah, both of them got on it very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And they both work from the same database, namely the Fab Cube.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So shout outs to all the members of the community that do that very thankless behind the scenes job. If you have any ability to show them your support, do so.
For sure.
Go tweet at them, talk to them, I don't know, shake their hand at your locals.
Or give them US dollars.
Or give them US dollars.
That's usually the best way. That's why I love being supported.
Yeah.
That's my love language.
Okay, so for this episode, we wanted to talk about hidden information in Flesh and Blood, how all the different ways in this game that you can hide info from your opponent, all the ways that you can glean info, because there's a lot that you might not be thinking about in every game, and that's okay, because this game is really complicated, and that's usually how it goes, is you're overwhelmed by the information you do have. You're not thinking about the stuff you don't. But that's why we wanted to dedicate an episode to it.
Yeah. Or a lot of the times it can become very instinctual, I've noticed, the way that people work around hidden information.
Yes.
And so you aren't thinking about it, right? You're definitely playing around it and utilizing it, but you just aren't consciously thinking about it. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to talk about that, because what spurred this was the Cloaked equipment.
Yeah.
From Part the Mistveil that was just released in those Blitz decks.
That was a really cool and unique keyword that they added to this slew of equipment.
Yeah. And so it got us thinking about, well, what does it mean for a card to be face down? What does it mean for you to not know what something is? So let's go ahead and jump into it with Fuzzy heading up our red pitch.
All right, let's review some of the fundamentals. We're going to start with pitch stacking, Flesh and Blood's perhaps most unique and iconic mechanic that sets it apart from other games, where when you use cards as a resource, they go back into your deck in the same order that you pitch them, roughly. And that's a really powerful mechanic. Being able to set up your deck so at a certain point in the game, you, in theory, if you have the ability to memorize all of it, know the exact order of the contents in your deck and perhaps influence that order in order to set yourself up to succeed later on. Or if you're not paying attention, you could perhaps set yourself up to fail.
It's no other card game really has this, right? Like no other card game really gets you through your entire deck like Flesh and Blood, and then lets you see see cards in your deck that you weren't able to play.
And I think I will say that there is a little bit of like, I'm going to put in heavy quotes here, flaw with this mechanic. And that's that, like, if I happen to not have a good memory, that's a big obstacle that I'd have to overcome in order to play at the highest echelons of this game. Like, imagine if I had like a mental impairment that stops me from memorizing. I think that there's like an inclusion factor that can come up just by this heavy, intensive memorization game that you can be playing. And there are certainly decks that can like avoid it. Like I play Katsu. I don't need to memorize my pitch stack. It won't help me. But like a hero like Kano might be out of reach. And we have the current policy now with the game competitively that you're not allowed to take notes. And I think that's a positive decision, because if everybody had the capacity to take notes, everyone would, because of all the power that you get from memorizing your pitch stack, or at least writing it all down. And if everybody's taking notes, all the games drag.
Yeah, top 8 with like no time limit, top 8s, they'd probably just be taking notes about like every single thing.
It's something that's been a factor in the game for a while and nobody's been complaining about, but I'm curious if Flesh and Blood like really increases in size, that it becomes a really big game, that it's going to be something talked about more. This idea of like memorization being a really core fundamental thing. And it also can come up in your opponent's pitch deck as well. When you're thinking about the sheer amount of stuff that you could memorize to gain an edge over your opponent, you also would want to talk about your opponent's pitch deck. I've heard of players like Tsubasa J. Ueda, who hosts On the Bobble. He happens to be really good at memorizing pitch stacks. And so he'll like be able to line up his cards and pitch them in a certain way where he's got the counter to your card when you draw it. Like, it's such a powerful asset. And there's a lot that you could be doing to gain those edges.
So I've definitely we think about pitch stack a lot in Levia games, and as someone who's been playing a lot of competitive Levia recently, I've been thinking a lot about the pitch stack, and like it's kind of a thing. Like I don't think it's as much of a thing as like you may initially think of it when you hear people talk about it.
Sure. I'm definitely talking from a more theoretical standpoint.
Yes.
You can totally get away with not concerning yourself at all. One other way that you can utilize hidden information is in the form of bluffing. Flesh and Blood, I think, I've heard all trading card games related to poker in some ways, but I think Flesh and Blood has extra carryover because you're playing hand to hand, just like in poker. Whereas with Magic, if you bluff a card, it's probably still there later. That bluff will kind of continue in later turns. But when you draw a completely new hand, you can have a completely new idea and convey that to your opponent. Like, if you don't block, you're telling your opponent something. You're telling them, you have to attack me, otherwise you might get hit by a whole lot of stuff, right? And it might be that that's exactly what you want them to do, because for whatever reason. Or if you keep a good hand and then arsenal something, they might think that card is especially prized, so you're baiting out potentially a Command and Conquer. A classic example is when they have 2 resources floating and they're coming at you with an expensive attack, and you're like, okay, do they have Pummel?
See, this is so interesting because I've just developed the heuristic of, yes, they always have it, make them have it.
Yep.
Because like you said, Fuzzy, being able to arsenal and keep the card is sustaining the bluff turn by turn by turn. And if they don't have it that turn, especially in late game situations, they're gonna draw it.
Yep.
So like I think the only time where you have to play around it
is when you're about to die.
you are right about to die.
Yeah.
Or it won't matter, right? You're
Right.
like, look, if I play around it here and it's not, then I lose anyway, because then I'm just completely sacrificing tempo to give it to the opponent. I mean, like, overblocking by 4 is a ton. So if
Yes.
you're playing around pummel in the late game, like, if they have pummel, I just lose. It's like, cool. If you block the pummel, then they're just going to have pummel next turn.
Yep.
Yeah, but you might have a D-react next turn where you don't have it this turn.
Exactly.
So you're able to flip
do-
the pivot.
You do need to think about what you have in your deck as well, but like at a certain point, I default to the heuristic of make them have it.
Either that, or like you can also just give them like your Crown of Providence. Like if it's CNC, you're facing down and you're worried about a pommel, you just give them your crown and that's it. Like you're kind of hedging against the absolute worst case scenario of what they might have. And that way you can still use that tempo. Because like if you're giving 3 or 4 cards to block a CNC completely, like you sacrifice all of your tempo and give them an extra turn to do the same thing again, even with maybe a scarier on hit.
Yeah, but you guys are thinking from the perspective of the defender. I want you to get in the mindset of somebody who does not have pummel, but recognizes that if they did have pummel, they would win. And your opponent would have to overblock to compensate.
Ooh, no, I'm too chicken shit for that.
I just think it takes an extra level of skill to fake having a card that you know would win you the game, even when you don't. Because I think we get really focused on the cards we do have. And that's all I want to like open up here is the possibilities of the cards you don't have being just as useful as the ones that you do.
I'm going to speak up here because I think that's setting a dangerous precedent. Don't do this. Like
Don't take a suboptimal play to buff pummel.
Yeah.
Or sorry, to bluff pummel.
Because like let's say you take like 15 damage from a like medium to like a turn that you could have very easily blocked out, but you chose to keep 3 cards. You just throw CNC and not the pommel because you don't have it, but you're bluffing it, and they're like, okay, I'm just gonna take this and put more pressure on you because you took a lot of damage. So now they just take the CNC, you arsenal it instead of sending it. Like, oh, okay, you definitely don't have it, and now they have all this tempo and this life bleed.
Yeah.
It's like you're never calling out of that.
I'm very much of the mindset of a threat is a promise, and it is only as good as your ability to deliver on it.
Okay.
So, like, while I definitely think that, like, if the turn lets you bluff pummel, then yeah, bluff pummel, right? Hell, maybe even, like, throw in some, like, nonverbal signs of, like, just check the arsenal, tap on it, right? Maybe, like, twist it a little bit sideways, like you're ready to put it out there.
Yeah, get your bluff game on.
You can do a little bit of that.
Don't do that either. That gets into some grimy territory.
It does,
I
but,
agree.
like-
It's a strategy, but I would say stay away from that.
I'm just saying, like, I think that is a more valid bluff than taking a suboptimal turn to bluff a pummel.
No, for sure. I agree with that.
So moving on a bit, I want to give a shout out to the assassin class in particular because assassins, I think, play the most with hidden information. You have heroes like Arachne that, like, Clark has been wanting to talk about Arachne a lot on the
I fucking
podcast.
love Arachne's design.
So I wanted to carve out a little bit of space to talk about them, where Arachne's hero ability specifically looks at the top card of the deck. It's the only thing well, I guess he can put it on the top or the bottom.
Cheater.
But by leaving it on top, he just gets the information. And that information can do a lot for them.
It can. I think it's a really, really special mechanic because, well, one, I think as a defender, again, I developed the heuristic of like, yeah, that better be something you want to banish. Right? But I think even just like the ability to like ruin the opponent's pitch stack.
Yes.
Or be like, I don't want to give you your Blood Rush Bellow now. I'm completely fine to throw that into second cycle. Anything like that I think is actually fairly decent. Because what you're doing is that you are making a choice about what the opponent's second cycle is going to look like when you put it to the bottom.
Right.
Right.
And I love the branching decision trees from there because you as the Arachne player can kind of pay attention to what they've pitched already, so you can know more about what their pitch deck is going to be. And also, like, even if you bottom a card that may have completed a contract, if you're like trying to dig for their power cards, I've heard that's
Digging for power cards.
kind of a use case scenario too. Like if you're not hungry for silver, like if you have both your equipment up already. Like maybe you just fish for other better cards than what you see on top. So I love the branching decision from there.
I've definitely had Arachnes just bottom every single card that wasn't an Art of War or Blood Rush Bellow against me as Levia.
Right.
They're just hunting for those cards because that's what puts me over 12 damage.
Right.
There's also Azuri.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Zuri.
And like, which 2 for 6 are you swapping in?
Yeah, because it really matters. Do I need to block for 4? Do I need to block for 6? Yeah, you're gonna mess up my 5-card hand, but how are you gonna mess up my 5-card hand?
Yeah, whether it's Shakedown or CNC, you play completely different with that D-React.
I recently got fucking sauced by Marcus because he switched in surgical extraction, and that was worse than the other 2 you just mentioned.
Yeah.
In that scenario.
And then if you get Shakedown in, the script flips, and suddenly you're trying to convince Azuri that you have a red, yellow, or blue, hoping she picks the wrong color. I've had games that have basically won because I got lucky enough that they picked the wrong color going into my hand.
Yeah. Like if you're not like a yellow line deck, like Bolton or Prism, and they just have to name blue or red, like sometimes that can be pretty impactful.
Or even I have one important red and multiple unimportant blues, and they choose blue, and I'm okay with losing one.
Right.
Yeah, I've definitely had Azuri's say like blue against me, and it's like, ha, joke's on you, I got 3 blues, baby.
So I want to move on to kind of the main reason why we chose this topic, and that's the cloaked mechanic. We've seen now, thanks to these blitz decks, and from some spoilers, that there's a series, 2 different cycles of cloaked equipment that start on the field face down, and you can flip them face up to be like, ha ha ha, this is the equipment I'm running, and they have different effects. Such as the Skycrest line, there's one for every slot that basically just prevents 1 damage, and you can turn most of them up at any time, except the chess pieces. Actually, no, the chess piece does that too. It's the only chess piece you can turn up at any time. Or the Aqua line that all have like different effects.
The Aqua line looks incredible. I think they're really powerful just because you get that effect when you turn them face up. Because I think the chess pieces all require you to be like 1 health at the start of your following turn. And then the extra block that you get. Like I love the cashing in of the effect on your turn, and then just blocking with, because they're not going to just pass to get rid of your 1 block value. So that value seems really cool to me. I love this design.
Aqua Lapse is actually really good. Like, just to be able to give something go again for 1 resource is actually like pretty far above rate compared to what we've seen with legs equipment before. Plus it blocks for 1. Like, yeah, Snapdragon Scalers is a little bit better because it doesn't cost anything. But for Snapdragon Scalers, it only targets specific cards. You could give your Command and Conquer go again with Aqua Lapse. It don't care.
Oh my god.
Or Aqua Seeing Shell being able to get an extra blue into your pitch zone. There's a couple cards that care about like you having pitched a blue this turn, not even necessarily to like play the card, just to like have a blue pitch there.
Oh, that might be a limited bomb.
Yeah.
I mean, not a bomb, but I think it's a great role player. Like, it's a great headpiece to grab based on what other headpieces we might see.
Even just turning a non-block into a blocking card is serviceable.
Well, there's some like shitty commons and rares of like the color locked blue cards for all Mystic heroes that care about how many cards you've pitched.
Yeah, how many blue cards?
So
you've
chaining
pitched.
them together like a bard would seems pretty dope.
So that's a little bit of nerding out about these cool cards, just mechanically what and how strong they are. But Cloaked in general is a mechanic that begs to be interesting, right? They didn't have to make them start face down. They could have made these like pretty normal cards, but they chose to introduce a new way of hiding information from your opponent. And when I first saw these, I thought of like, there's a requirement for these to be interesting. And that requirement is that there are multiple possibilities for what those cards could be that have different payoffs and different ways to play around them. Like if I have 2 very similar arms where the distinction between them is not interesting, then my opponent's not going to be worried about the fact that they don't know which one it is. They're going to play the same way, right?
Yeah.
That would be like a letdown for this cloaked mechanic. Or if there's only 1 good cloaked card for each slot, so when you're in Classic Constructed and they have a face down equipment, you pretty much know what it is because it's the only good one, that would also be like sort of, I think, a failure of what this mechanic is trying to do and the possibilities it's trying to invoke. I do think in Limited it will be like really typical for you to be curious what your opponent's face down equipment are. When you just kind of play whatever you happen to be able to draft in limited, it kind of really matters. Like those heavy hitter equipments with that like block 2 only if they block a certain equipment, right? You play around those. You care about whether or not you're giving them one of those equipments. And with this set, it's important to know whether they can give something go again or whether they can block an extra 1 damage and play around a breakpoint. And they could honestly have whatever shitty equipment they get. So it would make sense for them to have any of the equipment. You really have to think about, like, did I see this card passed around? You know, like, what am I seeing in draft? What's getting passed? What's the most likely thing for them to have?
Yeah.
I can see it really taking off in limited and actually doing what it is hoping to do. But we'll see if it happens in constructed too. That's about all I wanted to talk about for Red Pitch. Joel, could you tell us more about information, power, and perhaps some examples from other card games?
Absolutely. So I was a little hesitant about doing this episode, and I couldn't really figure out why, but I kind of narrowed it down. And that's because in most other TCGs, you can go 2, 3, or like a slew of cards into a matchup and still have no idea what your opponent is playing. Flesh and Blood, however, is very face up. You know the hero you're playing against, which already reduces the amount of like archetypes that your opponent's playing pretty narrowly.
For most heroes, it's basically 1, sometimes 2.
Yeah, exactly. Depending on the meta, like they're doing a very, very specific game plan, and if you know anything about the meta at all, you probably can figure out what they're playing. And then 2 seconds later, after you decide who's going, you see all of their equipment, which gives even more information. So there's still like maybe 10% that you don't know about your opponent's list. Like maybe it's how many ratios of a specific card, but even then, like there's an agreed upon ratio for every card. So that's why I was like, information game just isn't that interesting to me in Flesh and Blood because it's so core and
There's
and it's already
a lot less of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, when you talk about like pitch stack and bluffing, that's like as nuanced as it gets. A lot like the rest of it is just context clues, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I've heard stories in Magic where game 1, they draw up their hand. It's awful. They mulligan. They draw another hand. It's awful. They mulligan again. And they're mulliganing down to like 4, mulliganing down to 3 cards. And they're at a point where they can't win the game with this many cards in hand. So they just scoop. They would rather not show their opponent any more cards than have that like small, tiny chance of actually winning a game off of their nothing hand.
Yeah, or even like you're halfway through a game and you're in kind of like a semi-losing position. Like you see the scales tipping in your opponent's hand, in your opponent's favor. And you're like, I'm going to scoop now so that you don't see my tech pieces. And then now you have to contend with the cards in my deck still that you haven't seen or you don't know about, and my sideboard cards.
Yeah. Or like if the only way you can beat the Tron deck is with Blood Moon, so you keep that in your sideboard, and then game 1 they go first. They go Urza's Tower, and you go scoop. Let me get my Blood Moons in here.
Yeah.
Even still in Flesh and Blood, I've had multiple games at competitive events that I've lost because they showed me what hero they're playing and I falsely assumed what type of deck they were going to have. Like across different heroes. I think Riptide does this a lot. In SoCal, there's a lot of fatigue Riptide players. And when I come across a new Riptide player multiple times, I'm like, well, you're not my friend Talon, so you're probably playing aggro. And they're like, I'm playing Fatigue Riptide. I've never heard of anyone playing Fatigue Riptide before, so I wanted to try it out. I'm like, I should have known.
Or they're Talon's biggest fucking fanboy.
No,
and
they hadn't
have
heard
his
of Talon.
Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do.
Have now.
Either that or like Dash also. Like sometimes they can be like,
oh yeah.
Even if it's Pistol Plan, you don't know which one until they reveal. Like if it's Turtle Dash, or not Turtle Dash, Tree Frog Dash, then that's a completely different list, but the same like, you know, generic game plan. All that to say, that's why I'm kind of hesitant to even acknowledge that this is a thing in Flesh and Blood, because so much of it is solved for you. Like even now, like sometimes at tournaments they'll make you list what hero you're playing, so as soon as the round gets paired, you know who you're playing against before you sit down, like through Gem. You know what I mean? But moving forward away from that, I want to talk about like how Magic the Gathering plays with this first. Specifically with Modern and everyone's obsession with the card Thoughtseize. Like I feel like every every episode or every video that I watch on Modern, it always starts out with what iteration of deck and how they're interacting with Thoughtseize. And listeners, if you don't know what Thoughtseize is, it's basically a one cost sorcery or like action for Flesh and Blood case that says your opponent reveals their hand and you choose a non-land, non-creature, or
I think it's just non-land.
I think it's just
any
non-land.
non-land card.
Any non-land card, and you discard that card, and I think you lose like 2 life.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it is hand disruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get to force a discard out of your opponent's hand. You get to look at their entire hand so that you know what they are doing. It's roughly considered the best turn 1 play you could ever possibly do in many levels of the game, simply because you now know exactly what your opponent is doing and you've disrupted what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And where the opponent only draws 1 card every single turn, it's a pretty good thing.
Yeah. Compare that to, I think the closest thing we have to that would be like
Pick a card.
pick a card, any card where you get a silver.
Yeah.
Or bingo, where like if you hit, they reveal a card. Or also one of the dragons, like Optimi or maybe Dominia, one of them reveals your hand.
Mm-hmm. And really, how much value are you getting out of that? When the opponent then gets to draw a brand new hand again, I think honestly that's like where a lot of the power of Thoughtseize is. Yes, and the discard is powerful, but it's in the fact of you now know the other 6 cards in your opponent's hand.
Right.
And they don't get to just replace those next turn.
Right.
And that sort of lingering advantage that you have over the opponent is part of the power of that card that no matter how it gets printed in Flesh and Blood, will just not be present.
Yeah.
Lost in Thought is almost exactly like
Oh,
Thoughtseize.
yeah.
We all know about Lost in Thought. We're not dumb. I know you Illusionist players were thinking about it.
I kind of repressed that part of Dromai because it pissed me off so much. Like, and not
It's
very.
a 1-cost discard. Yeah.
What
just
I think
Thoughtseize.
I think it's a bottom deck, but it's still very, very strong. And the next example I have is also in Magic the Gathering, Surgical Extraction. It's same name but different card, and that is another 1-cost action card. That
Actually, I think it's Phyrexian Black.
yeah, I wasn't going to mention that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
now we can.
Sorry.
Phyrexian is basically like you can
You
either
can cast it for free.
you can pay them like 1 in-game resource, or you can use your life points to pay for it. And basically, if a card is in graveyard, you grab the rest of those copies of cards in your opponent's deck, and you can look at their entire deck. Like you technically search.
Can you imagine someone getting their first Blood Rush off and being like, man, can't wait to do that 2 more times this game?
Psych!
Nope.
It's just absurd. That's kind of like the power level that they're playing with in Magic, but it's kind of necessary because you don't see very much of your deck in Magic as compared to Flesh and Blood when you see like the same cards 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And across multiple games, like the information game is just so crucial in Magic compared to Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
And then lastly, and this one is what I was thinking of the most when we were doing the notes for this episode, which is Morph, which is basically Cloaked. Like you can play a card for like an alternative cost and put it on the field face down. Like normally Magic has creatures or different permanents that you put on the board face up. So in this case, you'd put it face down, and then it has another cost where you can flip it face up for a different effect. And it wasn't super relevant until they made a commander or like a hero specifically for this by the name of Kadena in
I am
EDH.
in love with the way you're explaining Magic the Gathering to Flesh and Blood players.
Yeah, let me put this in Flesh and Blood terms
Yeah.
for you.
No,
It's
literally.
very entertaining to me.
But basically, imagine if like an illusionist or a shapeshifter just started putting cards face down. No spectrum, no nothing. Worse, it's face down. They're all cloaked cards, and they can all swing for like 2 damage. You can't interact with them. It's like stupid stuff like that. But that's kind of what you can play with Magic the Gathering because the information game is so much more present in here than it is with Flesh and Blood. It's just stuff that just like cannot compute. Another thing that I really enjoy in other TCGs, I'm going to move on from Magic the Gathering to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Digimon. They have hand traps and trap cards in general, where you can place cards face down and you reveal them for an effect, we kind of have that with like Ripple Away. That's been a pretty recent iteration of like hand traps or disruption from the hand. And you could kind of liken this to some of the instances that you can play out of Arsenal at the end of someone's turn. Like, for instance, Clark might play Doomsday at the end of someone's turn when they have no more action points, or Prism might play Spectra at the end of someone's turn. Kind of the same thing, but in this case, it's like a special zone. So much more crucial in Yu-Gi-Oh! Not only because the card database is like 100 times bigger than Flesh and Blood at this point, and all of them do such unique things, and they're not like locked to specific heroes. Like, they're basically all generics.
Yeah.
I think Hearthstone is a really iconic one. It's a digital TCG, but it's one that I really like. And it had secrets, which are kind of like trap cards from Yu-Gi-Oh! But in Hearthstone, you never play things on your opponent's turn. So if you want to do disruption, you have these secrets that basically trigger automatically on certain conditions. There's one that's literally called Counterspell that Mage has access to, where like if they play a spell, counter that spell and your secret goes away. So if anytime they have a secret on the board, you'd be like, there's a chance it could counter my spell. So you have to play around it.
It sounds so much cuter and less menacing when it's called a secret. Shh, it's a secret. I won't tell.
And I always liked how you play them in advance, so you get them out of the way, and you don't have to like keep resources up, hypothetically, you know? But there was also the chance that like it didn't do anything, or that your opponent played around it. And they were only cool if you had multiple different ones that were relevant to the game. Like if there was only one that was ever played, it's not really a secret. And there were times there were like, there's one called like Explosive Rune that like dealt a bunch of damage to the next creature that you play. And that one was really good. It was so good, it didn't have to be a secret for you to play it. So everybody would just be like trying to play around Explosive Rune.
Yeah. I mean, I think throughout all of these, we kind of see a through line of like face down cards being very niche, being good in very specific circumstances, and then also the ability for them to be, when there's lots of options, that's when they're at their most interesting.
Right.
Because there's a really big mental game around it. I would also say that like the lack of the mental game is maybe one of the most refreshing things about Flesh and Blood.
That's
And,
so interesting that you phrase it that way.
Yeah.
That Flesh and Blood has a lack of a mental game. Like I see your point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it lets you focus on other things like tempo and pacing and like
I don't have
the
to
most optimal turn.
Yeah.
don't have to worry about counter spells pretty much at all. Like that's very refreshing. If my opponent has 4 cards in hand, I can still just take my turn. I don't have to be like pass priority here and go to this step.
Well,
I go to this step.
I mean, we do it anyway.
Mine is Prism and Wizard, but I get your point.
And those are annoying, aren't
Those
they?
are very annoying.
Those are not refreshing.
No. So I'm really happy with the conversation we've had so far about like how, information is interacted with in other games. But I want to ask this kind of open question to you both. If this information game, or like maybe like a face down card or like hand traps or whatever, if more of those were to be added in the game, like what hero do you think would use it best? What would it make sense in? Or like who deserves it the most?
Are you asking like existing heroes getting new design space?
Yeah, existing heroes. That's probably the simplest. Is there a fake hero you want to talk about?
I just
or
think
like a class.
I think a fortune teller class would be really cool. Maybe like a seer, like something that specifically revolves around seeing the future, quote unquote. That could be like playing with your pitch stack, playing with the cards on top of your deck in a new way, playing with the opponent's top of deck, or like even maybe like a secret from Hearthstone where you put some aura face down and you put a marker on it that specifically says this is a prophecy, and maybe the next time they play something with cost 2, it gets like -3 attack or something.
I could see this being a hero in like Fab 7.0 when they really like scraping the barrel. Like, let's just play with the pitch stackies.
I would say that if like any hero was to really build around it, I think we would see more of the cloaked keyword because it exists.
Yep, true.
And I
Low-hanging
think it would be new. Because one, I think we see cloaked already.
Sorry. New or nah?
New, as in new, because that's the play on words that they're doing. We already see Cloaked baked into the Mystic talent, and I think Assassin is the class that interacts the most with the hidden information game, and with reactions and instant speed effects outside of Wizard. So I think it's just sort of the best fit for her, and they just decided not to go that direction, probably because if you have too many face down mechanics and like design around a hero, it can get pretty annoying to have to play
For
against.
sure. Really bogs down the gameplay.
Yeah.
I feel like Enigma should get a shout out here because her name is literally Enigma. It means mystery. You know, that seems to be her vibe.
Yeah, I also thought of some really interesting rules interactions. A lot of Enigma's cards care about you not having any auras on the field when they pop. So having some face down, a bunch of them popping, and then flipping them face up to sort of like, quote unquote, rebuild your board to another big state very, very quickly at the sacrifice of not having it there to start with.
I was also thinking of another low-hanging fruit like Riptide, like literally a trap.
Riptide's traps very much sort of give the feeling of that like aggro hunter build from Hearthstone, right? Of like just having these few little sources of direct damage that you can like tuck away and save for right when you need them. It's pretty powerful.
That was a great discussion, Joel. I don't think we have time for Blue Pitch anymore. I think we should just skip it.
Yeah. Well, if you, the listener, have any ideas about who would be the most interesting to get like more mechanics that play with this information game, bluffing, mystery, all that stuff, feel free to jump in the Discord. Again, we're the only one with a spoiler page, so join us and come hang out. But I think I'm pretty much done. Clark, do you want to tell us what's going on in the Blue Pitch?
Oh, in the Arsenal zone? Sure thing, buddy. So for Blue Pitch, I have in my notes, I call it face up, face down gaming. So I want to talk a little bit about the face down hitting card design space and like what can Flesh and Blood do in that design space in a healthy manner, but also what are they already doing in that design space? Because they are already doing things there. We talked a little bit about Arachne. I also want to mention Dash and Dash.io, because Dash.io plays with a hidden zone, the top of your deck, and you get to see the top of your deck and just print it on the hero ability. That is a part of the value that they have baked into that hero. Now, being able to see the top of your deck is actually a pretty shitty ability unless you can play things from there, right? So what other heroes do this?
Play from the top of deck?
Yeah.
Kano?
Kano does it. Who else?
Azalea.
Yeah. And those are really powerful heroes that can do very powerful things by being able to play from an extra zone, right?
Yeah.
If you think about Leviah also has the ability to play from an extra zone. It's face up, right?
Yeah.
It's not as hidden. Just being able to play from an extra zone that you normally don't have knowledge of is a very powerful and very meaningful ability. I would like to propose the ability of playing off the bottom of your deck.
Okay.
Okay, Grenzo.
Right? Yeah, a little bit of inspiration from Grinzo from Magic the Gathering, but Grinzo definitely didn't like he was red black were his colors, and red black doesn't have a lot of scry. Scry is the keyword that for in Flesh and Blood is opt.
Right.
Right? It's the ability to put things to the bottom of your deck. So, and then being able to play off the bottom of your deck would be really powerful. Here, we kind of already can put things on the bottom of our deck with pitch stacking. But if you're trying to play your power cards off the bottom of the deck, why not just play them from your hand before you pitch them?
Well, I mean, if it's giving you an extra zone, it can be really nice too.
Yep. But you do have to sacrifice some tempo for it. So I think like being able to play off the bottom of your deck would be pretty interesting. Also, if you build it around blues, then you're expecting to pitch a lot of blues. Those blues then go to the bottom, and they're arguably going to be some of the weakest cards that you're able to play.
You could even reverse it. Like maybe this hero also draws differently. Like they do draw from the bottom of the deck, and it's like reverse. So whatever you pitch goes on top, and then all of your draw card effects draw whatever you put on top. I'm talking about like end of turn. Like end of turn, you draw 4 cards. Draw 4 from the bottom, and if you play like cash in, you draw 2 from the top. So you draw back what you pitch.
Oh, okay. So like anything that would say draw a card, you would still draw off the top of your deck.
Exactly.
AKA your pitch stack.
Right.
But you would still need to put those cards specifically into your deck for those purposes. Okay, I like it. That's an interesting idea.
Like if we're talking about thought experiments, that's
It's
another
complicated, but it's interesting, and that's what I wanted out of this conversation. I do want to note that so far, LSS has been valuing being able to see hidden information very, very highly.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at how low Arachne is and how low -IO are,
You talking about in the Living Legend leaderboard?
yeah, in the Living Legend leaderboard, I think it makes a lot of sense that like they baked some value into the hero designs, and they said, "Wow, being able to like see this extra value is powerful. Like that's a powerful." Arachne's ability is literally just being able to like control the top of your opponent's deck.
Mm-hmm.
They thought that was a hero ability.
Right.
KO gets everything is a 6 now, and also you get a might provided you're able to discard every turn.
Right.
It costs an arm.
It does cost an
it
arm.
did
You're
cost
right.
him an
I do want to that should be noted that he loses the
I
ability
mean,
to have.
maybe
block.
Arachne just ditches that ugly hump and he gets like, I don't know, another hero power.
Wow.
I'm just saying.
Are you calling the Mugly?
It's not pretty. They're wearing a mask for a reason.
So far, I think they've been overvaluing being able to see hidden information. Pick a card, any card, I think is also very much in that realm.
Yeah.
And the moment that you start giving more tools to the hidden information game, the more powerful it becomes. So we kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked about the cloaked mechanic, right? For the cloaked mechanic to be actually viable, for it to be seen in Classic Constructed, for it to create the gameplay concerns that we may want them to be, you need a lot of them. And you need a lot of them to be viable.
Mm.
In a similar vein, we have cards that care about being able to name things like Censor. But if you don't know what's in the opponent's hand, they're bad. But the more things that let you look at the opponent's hand, the stronger Censor becomes. And there actually is, I think, a push and pull to the decks and that design, because if you have a bunch of cards that just let you look at the opponent's hand, you're then losing value. Because if each one just says, look at the opponent's hand, you've already looked at the opponent's hand on the first card.
Right.
When you play the second one, you're not getting that additional value.
Yeah, because they gave us like Seduce Secrets, which lets you look at their hand and the top of deck, which is cool. But they made it like a non-block, which kind of like defeats the purpose of running it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also allows you to have a 5-card hand in hand, which is powerful in its own right.
That
Yeah,
is
'cause
true.
it draws a
It
card.
replaces it, yeah.
You just have to hold it and be vulnerable while it's in your hand and then get it into Arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I think Flesh and Blood is still young. It's definitely getting there, you know? Like maybe it's a 12-year-old, metaphorically. It's a tween. And I think inevitably it will get to some of these mechanics that really play with information, but we have to explore more of the fundamentals first. I think we're just now getting to the point in the game where the fundamental stuff is not quite as interesting anymore. They still like are able to iterate on it, but now that like they wouldn't have printed Cloaked a year or two ago, but they're at the point now where they want to start playing with it. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. I think that's a very good point to bring up, especially because I feel like everyone is still expecting more classes to be added to the game. Feels like Flesh and Blood still has a lot of quote-unquote growing up to do.
For sure.
So now I want to ask, this is a little similar to what Joel asked at the end of Yellow Pitch, right? Which is, what could this look like in the future? But I kind of want you to divorce it from like classes and heroes and instead focus mechanically. Mechanically, how can we make face down things work in Flesh and Blood? Or how can we make this information game work in Flesh and Blood?
I think the really elegant thing about Magic is you play morph cards face down as a standardized creature.
Yes.
It's a 2/2 that could be flipped face up. Like they gave it stats. They gave it like not quite effects, but a standardized effect on the board. And you could do a similar thing here. Like I loved those tokens that you put them on top of the card and it says, this is a morph dude. It's a 2/2 with a morph effect. And you could do something really similar in Flesh and Blood where like the prophecy thing I was talking about earlier. You have a little prophecy token you put on top of your prophecies. So it's face down because there's more information there, but it's face up in the sense that you know it's a prophecy. You know it can be triggered in some way.
Yeah.
It has a standardized casting cost That would help a lot too.
The rules are also listed on the morph card, right? So again, this was sort of my little hang up about cloaked cards of like, technically there's no information there, right? Like you can't do anything. But if you were to put a token on top of the card that had rules like this card has an additional cost to turn it face up and do something, any new player sitting down at the table can look at that and say, oh, okay, at some point in the game you can pay a cost. I don't know what that cost is. It'll be different for every card. But then you'll be able to turn this face up and do something with it. That is exactly what I think we need in Flesh and Blood. I also think that right now they did Cloaked as equipment because they probably couldn't standardize it, right? For like auras or something else that they put into the field. Like,
Well, it's also bad. Like, cards that make a board state have traditionally, most of them, been either unplayable or cracked. Whereas equipment is the board state in Flesh and Blood.
yeah.
And without giving Mystic as a talent, like an aura feel, which is again very different than the fundamental game of Flesh and Blood, like making it on equipment makes it more easy to design, more easy to engage with, and easier to balance.
Joel, what do you think?
I'm so glad you asked. I'm gonna cook right now. Hold on. So, I'm thinking of a landmark where it's like, and I'm getting this idea off of someone that submitted an idea to the custom card design. So if this sounds familiar, speak up. I don't want to take credit from your design at all, but basically do like a marketplace where you can put cards face down underneath it from your deck. So it kind of acts like a soul shackle token in a way. And then you can pay a standardized cost, maybe like pitch a blue to pay 3 and you get a card. Like maybe you're trading a blue for a red in that case.
Yeah.
And in that way, it is something that everyone has access to. And, you know, obviously landmarks can't exist when there's another landmark. Deathmatch Arena gets really good here. You're kind of like, okay, he has a few cards there. And if there's like an alternative cost, like sacrifice or like maybe discard cards or whatever, like basically give that card, the landmark, a cost to destroy it. Or you can like pay resources to get a card that they banish as well. Like say for instance, I put a card underneath my landmark and then you, Clark, you're against me. You're like, okay, I want that card so you can't get it on your following turn. So I pitch a blue and I grab that card and I'm able to play it for the turn. Similar to like news ability.
Yes, news ability or infiltrate.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Wait, Joel, who can use that ability?
Both players
players.
would have the ability.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm just memeing.
damn it. I
What?
missed it.
He like talked about a hero I just didn't recognize, you know?
Yeah. It sounded like he said new.
Oh my
but
god. This joke doesn't work.
Did you mean nah, Joel?
I did mean that.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
You guys
sorry.
get in the comments and tell them to stop.
It says right there on the hero. Nah.
We're just using the letters that's intended. But yeah, that would be my card design. I would love to see another landmark or like a marketplace or some token that basically lets you banish or put cards underneath it from your deck.
And I like that. I honestly think like face down and that kind of information game and like bluffing doesn't work great in CC Flesh and Blood, but it would go very, very well into casual Flesh and Blood.
For sure. Yeah, it's an interesting design space, and so hopefully they play around with it a little bit more, like maybe with UPF or hopefully PvE. Maybe that's a thing there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why are you hiding information from your friends? PvE.
I don't know. Maybe there's like a hidden objective or like an
okay.
ulterior motive. You know.
That'd be cool.
What other hidden zones sort of are there? Because I kind of want to make a list here. So there's like the top of my deck, the top of my opponent's deck. There is the cards in hand,
Sideboard too.
inventory.
Yeah.
Some interaction around inventory might be really interesting. Like we didn't even talk about concealed blades or like any of those like equip a dagger cards.
Or the new Olympia specialization.
Or the new Olympia specialization. All of those technically play with hidden information because you don't know what's in the opponent's inventory.
It's true.
But yeah, inventory and playing around with the inventory space is another place of hidden information. We already see a couple of cards that are doing it there, and it would be interesting to see more play with that, especially with the dagger build. Because the dagger build was a really interesting thing out of Outsiders that we all liked.
Yeah, that's gonna be dog shit for so long until they add like more daggers or more ways to equip from inventory.
Yeah. But the moment that they do, I think like it's going to become a really interesting design space.
For sure.
And we are already seeing how like it's difficult because inventory spots are getting fuller and fuller as people are trying to spec for a wider and wider metagame. All right. I think that's kind of all I have for Blue Pitch.
Sweet.
So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to our Arsenal Zone.
Let's go.
Listeners, the Arsenal Zone is the moment of our podcast where we all talk about a card that we've been thinking about lately for good, bad, or ugly reasons. Clark, why don't you start?
I will start. I made a promise today to say 1,000 words about Double Trouble.
Oh, goodness. Only
Get ready for the longest Arsenal Zone of this podcast.
So we get a break from your normal rants of Double Trouble.
I love Double motherfucking Trouble. This card got announced, and I'm like, oh, this is like the best fucking card for new. Like, fuck all the Majestics. I don't give a shit about them. I didn't see a single Majestic yet. Fuck all the Majestics.
Gorgon's Gaze.
Yeah, that card's cracked as shit. But like, Double motherfucking Trouble is where it is at. This is a 0 for 3 stealth card that blocks for 3. And if you're able to activate 2 attack reactions, so that's activate an ability on an equipment, that is a hero ability, that is playing them. Doesn't matter. As long as 2 attack reactions are put on this chain link, it gets +2, and when this hits an opposing hero, banish the top 2 cards of their deck.
Double Trouble. Double Banish.
Dude, it's so good. One, this is exactly the design I want to see in Flesh and Blood. This is an underrated card. It is a 0 for 3 with no other relevant ability. It is underrated. But if you can activate its effect, it becomes way overrated. It's a 0 for 5 with a doubled on-hit effect that you would normally expect from the same card in the same slot. So if you can play around it, it gets so much stronger, and if you can't play around it, it is a lot weaker.
I like how it synergizes with all the attack reactions that make attack reactions that are in the set.
Mm-hmm. It's very scalable.
And it's very scalable.
Like typically Assassin, I feel like struggles from playing with more than 2 or 3 cards, and this is a good way of like not only getting benefit in buffing it, but with these fucking Slither tokens getting flown or thrown around everywhere, you can lead into another attack very easily.
Yeah, this card can also be solo turned on by the new Assassin arms equipment and legs equipment, where as an attack reaction, you can spend a resource and break it to get another token ephemeral attack reaction. So just off of that alone, you can get 2 attack reactions. Or you can play one of the attack reactions. It's Hiss or Venomous Strike, Venomous Bite.
Venomous Strike?
Yeah.
No, wait. That's not what you're asking.
It's Venomous Strike or Bite.
Venomous Bite.
Or Venomous Bite, where for 1, yes, you get to pump the power and make an ephemeral token, which, hey, there's your second attack reaction. But this also works off of just the normal 0 for 3 attack reactions that we have. The 1 for 3, the the Spike With set from Outsiders, because this is a stealth card. Yeah, go ahead and throw a disease on hit on top of this. That's definitely fair and balanced. You can also just... Everyone forgets about it, but the legendary arms assassin equipment is 2 resources to activate as an attack reaction to reduce the blocking effect of a card on the chain link.
Oh, Shriek Razors?
Shriek Razors. Like, that's so good. Off of a single blue and a 1 cost in hand, you can activate Shriek Razors and then the 1 cost. There's your 2 attack reactions. Like, there are so many ways that you can turn on Double Trouble. And I think what's especially great about it is that it's an overrated blue. So you are now rewarded for throwing attack reactions on top of your blues, when before that was one of the worst things to do, and it actually made late games feel bad for assassins, because you had these blue 1 power, 2 power cards, and you have your like blue attack reaction. It just doesn't feel good to make that work. But even blue double trouble with the blue venomous bite, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Going from 1 power to 5 power in the attack reaction step, that's enough to really make a big difference in a game.
For sure. And if we're looking for blues in order to turn on our Transcend cards, blue double trouble looks like a great pick.
It's an incredible pick. I love double motherfucking trouble. In every single draft, this is a fucking windmill slam in the early packs. This is a signal to go into Assassin. I am telling you, this is like the strongest rare in the set.
And we haven't even seen all the rares in the set.
I'm calling it, baby. Double Trouble's where it's at. Force Assassin. It was good in Outsiders. It's good in Part the Misfail.
All right, Clark, is that your 1000th word?
Carry the 2.
So my card for today is Blue Surging Strike.
Oh!
Joel was talking about building Zen earlier, and we were talking about, like, I was trying to convince him to just run the entire Dishonor line because it's really good, even if your hero ability says Crouching Tiger on it, you can just still run them all. And he was like, well, how many Blue Surging Strikes does Katsu run? And I'm like, none. But if I don't need the on hit from Yellow Surging Strike and I'm trying to play blues, I think this is an okay one. Now, I'm not going to be excited about playing 3 damage go again for 2 resources. That's a big commitment. But if it turns on all my Transcend cards, it's basically free money. And if I don't care about the on hit, it's basically free money. So I brought a copy of Blue Surging Strike for each of you. I'm excited to... I think this card might be in the set. Is that like confirmed yet?
No, it's not in the set at all.
So I'm excited to test this card out in Zen when the set is released. Here's one copy for you and one for you.
Thank you, Fuzzy.
Thank you, Fuzzy. It's wonderful. I love it so much. Here, I'm going to rub it on the mic right now.
Joel, what do you got?
So it's funny you bring up Surging Strike because I'm bringing up Bonds of Ancestry, and I'm like almost 90% sure that someone's brought it up before. It might have been you, Clark, because I don't have a signed copy.
it was probably Fuzzy.
Maybe.
Or maybe I was bitching about it.
Well, you were when Zen, before Zen got revealed, or maybe after Zen got revealed, you were really worried about Zen being a Bonds of Ancestry hero, and I was like, no, he'll be Crouching Tiger. And I was testing with him today, and based on the rares and the commons, he's probably going to be a Bonds hero. Like, it's just so hard to make great use of the combo, or the Tiger combo line, because a lot of them are 2 card combos, like Crouching Tiger and then whatever, or whatever, and Crouching Tiger like +1. It just seems really weak right now. And as I was talking with you both, it just seems like Bonds of Ancestry with like the Surging Strike, Whelming Gustblade, Descending Gustwave, and eventually Dishonor. Like, there's a lot of blues you can't play in Katsu, like Blue Surging and Blue Bonds and Blue Descendant, like that maybe get better in Zen because he cares about, you know, transcending with multiple blues in one turn. But yeah, I think until we get some really, really cracked Majestics for both Ninja and Mystic Ninja, I feel like he might just default to this because it's just going to be more consistent. Or he might just not be played at all, and Katsu reigns supreme once again.
I don't think there's a problem with every ninja running this combo line.
To kind of compare it to some other decks, like I've heard a lot of people upset with like Dorinthia being reduced to like just being a hatchet monkey as compared to like using what she was originally intended for, which is Dawnblade. So I get the concern there. Like, you want heroes to do different things than the previous ones, and when it becomes a numbers game, like you can kind of be like you can reduce an entire class to a different playstyle, much like Blood Rush Bella does, or Hatchets does, or...
I think another thing I wanted to mention here is the talented aspect of Zen is like another reason why I may be a little bothered by this. If you're comparing like base warrior to base warrior and say, it's annoying how similar they are. And it's like, well, they're both base warrior.
Sure.
But like Fi really stands out from Katsu because he has a draconic talent and he has a very different playstyle. And I really enjoy that. seeing Mystic almost like not influence the way that Zen is playing at all would be upsetting, because it's like, okay, where's the talent identity? He's just been reduced to a different flavor of Bond's ninja.
Yeah, there are like specific things that Zen can do that Katsu can't, but they're very subtle. It's literally just he can put Crouching Tigers in hand, and Katsu can't except for one card that is on your next turn. It's a shitty aura. So that being the distinction does feel like a very small boon. Like you'd hope that the Mystic would get like a whole new combo line
Yeah.
equipped with cup holders, but it's just like, oh, that if you don't look very closely, it's the exact same stuff they printed in Dynasty.
But hey, everyone's been telling me there's still time, so hopefully we'll see something in the next couple of weeks for spoilers.
And I think it's time for us to sign off of our podcast. What do you guys think?
Yep. Until next time, guys. Bye.
We love you all.
Bye-bye.
Go to our Discord.
Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Fuzzy Delp, Clark Moore, and Joel Recinos. Executive producer, Talon Stradley. Music by Dillon Hulse. Logo by Han V. Sound mixing, Christopher Moore. And last but not least, you. Thank you for listening. Please give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me podcast.
I'm Joel. This is my speaking voice, at least for the first part, and then I'll probably be talking like this a little bit more monotone.
I'm Fuzzy and I'm a podcaster. This is how I like to talk.
I'm Clark, and this is how I talk on my podcast.
What do you think, chat? Do you like my new podcasting voice?
And today, I will say 1,000 words about Double Trouble.
I think all our mics are good.
Yep.